Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the top 10 mixing tips that I do in every single song that I mix. I hope you're all doing really well. Hope you're staying safe and healthy and happy. This one is interesting for me because I've probably talked about most of these. One or two of them I've mentioned once or twice over the now 1,000 videos that we've done. 5.5 years ago, we started this channel. And in 5.5 years, 5.5 years, we've managed to do 1,000 videos. That's nearly 200 videos a year. So you can see it's grown into quite a dedicated, large quantity of information. Hopefully you love it. And of course, if you have any ideas for future videos, please leave them below. If you haven't been to producelikeapro.com, please do. You can sign up for the email list there and get a whole bunch of free goodies. You can also try out currently a 30-day, that's 30-day free trial of the Academy. And there are tons of multi-tracks in there, lots of wonderful people to work with. It's a great place to come and hang out and learn from others. Okay. Let's get stuck in. These 10 are the most common things that I deal with in every single time I mix a song. So the first thing I do when I open up a drum kit is phase align multiple mics. So in this instance, what we're going to look at is 3 kick drum mics and get them all to be in phase of each other. Now, the inside kick is the top one here. Then there is a kick out, which is the other side of the kick right up against the other head. And then there is a resonator, which is actually, believe it or not, another kick drum in front of it. So we can listen to those 3 elements here. Here's a kick in. Got a lot of attack, kick out. And the resonator head, which is another kick drum in front of that kick drum mic'd up. So we have all of those 3 elements. So here you see this first one here, this kick in, if we put it down to the latest kick, which is here, it's quite a long way out. So we're going to measure the distance between these waveforms here. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. So I measure here to here, it is 122 samples. Here I've got averaged off at 107. Let's make it 122. So let's listen to these 2 microphones with and without the time adjuster. So here's without the time adjuster. Put the time adjuster on. Take it off. Back on. So what it's doing is it's adding a little bit more low end because now both the elements are in phase of each other. So I can do the same now with the kick out. So I pulled that down so it's a little bit more visible. So we can just time align that. It's actually fairly accurate because even though it's a little early there, you're never going to get all 3 mics to be perfect because they're hearing different parts of the kick. But if you bring all 3 in now, it's just a little deeper, a little bit more low end. First thing I always do is time align the kick drums. Next up, number 2 is phase aligning the snare drum to the overheads. The thing about the overheads that I love, at least the way I record them, is I record them to be an accurate representation of the drum kit. Either a spaced pair facing towards the snare or an XY above the drums. Either works and they give you a really, really nice view of the drums. However, they're going to be later. So you're going to hear them just that little tiny bit later. So if I take the snare drum and bring it down to the overheads, so here's my overhead stereo mics here. So if you see the snare top here, I've made the waveforms bigger so it's easier to see. You'll see if I measure them off here, it needs to be delayed with time adjuster or whatever you can use in your DAW. Some people will move these files in phase or they use a plugin to do it. Personally, I just move them ever so slightly back so it gets the body that I want to hear. So it's averaging about 109 samples. It's going a bit quicker, going a bit narrower. Let's say a little bit more. It's probably about 115. I estimated 118 before, so we'll go change it to 115. So let's listen to it with and without the time adjuster on. Here's without. Put it on. I mean, it's a massive difference. Maybe you could argue with the kick drums, there's a subtle difference. It's a little bit more focused, but with the snare and the overheads, the difference is enormous. Many people heavily EQ overheads and remove low end and low mids. I do that as well, but not so much on the low mids necessarily. I'll tug out about the 350 area, which makes the tom sound boxy, but I'll leave a little bit of naturalness to the overheads. And that makes a huge difference with the snare. One more time, I'll play it again. Here it is with it off. Put it on. It's huge. The snare, just all that body comes back. So you can see what a massive difference like phase aligning snare drums can be. So here we have the tom trick. Now the tom trick is something I do a lot of. There are new plugins now that can do it as well. So let me show you how I do it manually, and then I'll show you the new plugin that we really like. So here's the tom tracks. There's a lot of bleed, but there's also a lot of hums, just the toms ringing, which is pretty standard. And once you start compressing the overall kit, that will be really greatly exaggerated. So typically what we try to do is remove it, or at least reduce it, so that by the time it's compressed, if it comes back up, it's not over the top. So the normal trick really is either to use clip gain or just regular gain. So we can just go in here, grab a gain control if you don't have clip gain in your DAW, and reduce it quite dramatically. About 18 dB, minus 18 dB is quite nice. So I bring that down, and now what I can do is go up to the front of these toms, like such, and put fades in. It will take you about 10 or 15 minutes to go through a drum kit to do this. Take this area after the toms just for illustration. I can cut to here, like so. This doesn't remove it entirely, but it reduces it. And then I can put the fade in here. Like so. And off you go. Massive difference, and really useful. If I want to apply a lot of compression to that afterwards, some of that background will come up, but it won't come up so dramatically that it's completely useless. So that's the tom trick. Now, and I've been doing that for years. I learned that from Mark Endert, early 2000s. Now there are a couple of fun plugins. Let's go to the rack for a second. This is a quick reminder because we did review this the other day, and there will be a link down here to get it. It's on sale at the moment. It's freaking awesome. It's a multi-band gate. It's just remarkable how well it works and how quick it is to use. Bring the threshold here. I mean, I haven't done anything. Just move the threshold up. See how remarkable it is? I can bring down the ugly mid-range, bring up the low end, bring up some brightness. It's remarkable. Move the crossover point back. It's remarkable. Easy to use, sounds great straight away. You can adjust the low band, attack and release, the mid, the high. You can do all kinds of stuff. But frankly, see how quick that was just to make it sound good? There it is. Really remarkably good plugin. Number 4, reducing snare bleed in the overheads. I love this. You phase aligned it, you put some body back in it. But let's just say you want to make it a little bit more snappy. So we grabbed a compressor here, just a good old-fashioned Renaissance compressor, the R-Comp as it's commonly known. Let's take a section here. Okay, we're going to send from the snare itself. So we'll grab, I don't know, bus 5, for instance. And we're going to key that here on 5. So what have we done? We have now got the snare controlling the compression on the overheads. So we can set our threshold so every time the snare plays, it just dips a little bit out of the overheads. Have a listen to this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this in pre-fade so I can mute the snare and you can hear it with and without the compression. There it is. See, now it's got that pa, pa, pa. Love it. It just adds a little bit of spank to the snare. It's really nice. Listen with and without. These are subtle things, but they can make such a huge difference. Turn it off. It's almost like using a transient designer. You've phase aligned your snare top to your overhead, so the transients are all nicely in line. But now it's letting a little bit of that attack go through, and it's just that pa, pa. It's fantastic. Absolutely love those two things together. It's a really, really nice effect. Very subtle, but all of these things, you add them together, these subtle moves, end up making a drum kit very easy to mix, and means that you're not using gates, which can be a real pain in the butt to use, except for that multi-band gate, which is just pure genius. But you're not using these traditional gates to try and control, removing bleed from stuff. This is really a nice trick. You can also do the same thing with the kick drum. You can have the kick drum side chain to the snare drum if there's too much kick bleed in there for you, and just use a compressor. And it's really tasty because it'll make the kick just go pop, pop, pop. Have the attack of the kick really lightly in your snare track, as opposed to like tons of bleed. It doesn't work if you've got a 4 on the floor groove. Obviously, if there's a whole section where, kick and snare are playing together. But you can always turn it off there and just automate it off. So let's move on to reverbs. Number 5, EQing excessive low end and high end out of a reverb, commonly known as the Abbey Road trick. So here I have a reverb at 3/4 of a second, which is a pretty standard time for me on drums. It really depends. I don't want a super long decay on a fast groove like this, but I don't want a short decay like this or a shorter decay like this on something that's really, really spacious. So use common sense. Typically, you can measure out between beat to beat and find out how many milliseconds it is inside of your DAW. But just remember, the audible end of the decay will probably disappear far sooner than it says it will. Because it might be 3/4 of a second between beats, between kick beats. It might be 1, 2, 3. But if you measure that exactly that length, you'll probably find that it's audible about 2/3 of the way through and then just disappears. So it's not a science. You've got to change the reverb length to be the sound that you want it to be, the length that you want it to be. We're on for 3/4 of a milliseconds here. We've got the kick in. We're going to send to it. So we're coming in 15, 16. Here it is without the EQ engaged yet. bypass it. So the fear is you get this build-up of low end. You get this woo, woo, woo going on. It happens a lot. So what we do is we grab our EQ and we put it in a high-pass mode here. And we just come up. We come up to like 400, something like that. Now also, we don't need the excessive high end. So let's go and grab this one and low pass it. Now, with excessive low end in a reverb, it just ends total mush. So I always wipe out that low lows on that kick there. So now we're getting rid of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into pre-fade and we're going to have a listen. So this is just the reverb from the kick. Before. You hear that It sounds nice on its own, but in the track, it's just a big load of reverberating around. Together. So it just keeps the low end super, super tight. I also do the same things on toms. If I'm adding additional reverb to toms, I will do the same trick. You can also use it on vocals, you can use it on guitars, anything you're concerned about a buildup of low end or high end. High end is also a big deal. You want a low pass, remove the highs, because on some things like acoustic guitars, it's nice to have a beautiful reverb, but if it's super high endy and it just ends up creating all these extra kind of like fizz over the top, it can also make the high end a total mess as well. So focusing your reverbs top and bottom is a really, really good thing. On vocals, on acoustic guitars, on electric guitars, kick drums, toms, you name it. Shape your reverb. Now, many reverbs have EQs built into them. I personally like putting an EQ into it. There is a new reverb coming out that we just tried out that has the EQ built into it that seems to sound really, really good to me. You'll see about that one very soon. This is a trick I've talked about a lot. If you only have one source on your bass guitar, number 6, creating a separate low and high control from just one source. Now, if I could only choose one element from a bass guitar, it would be the DI. The DI typically, not always, but 99% of the time, is the cleanest signal path you're going to get. So if we listen to the bass here, you can tell flat wound strings, and he's playing with his fingers. There's hardly any bite there whatsoever. But it's a good source to use. It's our only choice here. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to duplicate it. You've seen me do this 100 times, but I'm going to show you one more time. So I'm going to get an REQ2, a 2-band EQ, and I am going to go down to about 150, 200 area and just listen to that on its own. Now we just have a DI that's living somewhere about 30 hertz to about 150, 200. It's just a blob of consistent low end. And it is fairly consistent. Now, if we go to our other one, which is our duplicate, we can grab an EQ and do the opposite. So let us take this up to about 150, 200, around about here, and have a listen to this. You can hear, because he's using flat wounds, there's hardly any high end at all. Not a lot going on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some saturation. Kind of nice. So what I've done is I've created like a crushed, distorted, crazy amp sound. Now I'm going to blend it with our clean DI of just the low end. Pretty awesome. Let's bring the bass down a little bit in the mix. There you go. So that's all just from a DI. This is what we started with on the DI. And this is what we ended up with. So, 7 guitars. Panning the guitars opposite each other and putting a reverb opposite each one. I love this effect, so I'll put a guitar over here and then put its reverb on the other side. You've heard me talk about it before, but I'm going to show you one more time. Okay, so the guitar is panned away to the left, some totally trashy guitar sound. And I'm going to take the reverb you see here is panned to the right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab a mono reverb. And this is just a good old fashioned, comes free with your DAW reverb. We'll go about a second. We'll go room, 1 second, medium, 3/4 of a second. Here we go. Now that is going to be panned to the right. So now we have the left-hand guitar on the left and the reverb on the right. Now if I copy that reverb down, if we go to a right-hand guitar and send it to a reverb down here, which is panned to the left, we'll get the opposite effect. So now we have this right-hand guitar with its reverb on the left. It creates space. It's not a washer verb. One of the things I don't like about stereo reverbs is it just sort of muddies the area. So I've got one guitar here, it's reverb opposite. The other guitar here, it's reverb over here. I do it all the time. You see me talk about it. I hear a lot of people now are using it and telling me they do it as well. It's a really, really smart, simple way of creating space and not creating clutter in your mix. So number 8, using dynamic delays and dynamic reverbs. So if I take the lead vocal here. So you wanna be a rolling stone. You think it's easy being on your own. So there you go. Straightforward, untreated vocal. So here's the fun thing. I'm going to send to the H delay here. So it's coming from 21, 22 to the H delay, and there's a compressor afterwards. So we don't need a compressor on the moment. Let's have a listen to the vocal. So you wanna be a rolling stone. Sounds cool. Maybe a little bit more. So you wanna be a rolling stone. So you wanna be a rolling stone. I like the delay afterwards, but I'm a little concerned that I'm going to end up with too many delays going on inside of the phrase. So you wanna be a rolling stone. Like that is really nice, very beatly, that stone at the end. Okay, so what do? I take the R compressor, the Renaissance compressor, and I create a send from the vocal itself. You're like, what? So I'm sending from 21, which is one of the sends that are being sent to the delay, also to the compressor, which comes after the delay. So this is what we're going to get.
So you wanna be a rolling stone. So you wanna be a rolling stone.
Brilliant. Dynamic delay, simple as that. I am compressing the delay while the vocal is singing, and as soon as the vocal stops singing or it reduces, it turns up the delay. It's a really simple trick, but it's fantastic just for the effect of the delay without it muddying things up too much.
So you wanna be a rolling stone. So you wanna be a rolling stone. So you wanna be a rolling stone.
Great, simple trick. So now we can use the same inputs that we just used on the delay. So I'm going to grab a reverb. I'm actually going to copy, you guessed it, the compressor down. So I'm using the same settings. I'm going to shorten the reverb. Maybe we'll go to a medium room. There you go.
So you wanna be a rolling stone. So you wanna be a rolling stone.
Nice.
So you wanna be a rolling stone.
Together.
So you wanna be a rolling stone. 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 So you wanna be a rolling stone.
Great tricks, really simple. Allows the vocal to feel really clean and clear and to sit beautifully in there, but then create some interesting effect after the phrases finish. It's a really double whammy. It makes the vocal more interesting and adds extra effects and ear candy when you're listening on headphones or just really deep into a song. Number 9, using distortion and saturation. Now, you might have noticed I've been using a lot of distortion and saturation plugins recently. There's a massive move towards using them. I think so many people using virtual instruments, we're trying to find ways of making them more interesting. And the fact that everybody's virtual instruments are identical now, like, oh, I've all got the greatest piano sound ever. The problem is we've all got the greatest piano sound. Oh, I've got the greatest string sounds, the greatest brass. That's the problem. It's all perfectly recorded in incredible studios by amazing musicians and all sounds the bleeding same. So that's where saturation and distortion starts to come in. However, there's other reasons to use it. So here we have some far room mics, which we've sculpted a bit. Have a listen to these. Sound good, but what's the problem? The bell of the ride sounds like the loudest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some saturation. So here we have good old-fashioned lo-fi. The reason why I'm picking this is because it comes free with my DAW. So I'm sure you have a free saturation distortion plugin. So let's have a listen and then start bringing it in. Huge difference. So I just turned the saturation up there to only 1.2. Listen how the bell now, which was sticking its ugly head out, is just folding into the room mics. Here it is bypassed, and you'll hear it come in. So much better. Now that ride cymbal, because it's like super piercing, super sticking out above everything else, bring in saturation, all those transients start folding in. I mean, saturation is a pretty darn good tool in many, many situations. Room mics in particular for overzealous cymbals. I use it all the time. Another great place for saturation would be on a vocal.
I can feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. I can feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road.
I mean, it takes a polite rocking vocal and takes it into a rocking vocal. Here's in bypass.
Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm. I can feel the rhythm. I feel the rhythm of the road. Feel the rhythm.
Saturation's your friend. Maybe soloed, sometimes it sounds a little bit much, but just hear how it sounds in the track. But you see, it just gave the singer more attitude. Got to love saturation and distortion. Last but no means least, 10. Use multiple reverbs and delays. You're like, what? What do you mean? Simple as this. When you've got a lead vocal and you've got a stripped down verse, which is typically what happens, it might go to one guitar, bass, and drums. You can use a shorter, more like maybe like a bathroom reverb or something like that. It doesn't need to be washed out unless you particularly want that sound. But when the band comes in really full blast in those choruses, you can go to bigger, longer reverbs. So don't be afraid to use different reverbs. I often use 3 or 4 different reverbs in a song. I'll have a short one in the first verse. Second verse, I might have something in the middle because it's a little fuller. And in the chorus, I might put a big play on it, like a 1, 2, or even 3 second decay time, just because all of the instruments will soak it up. So I'll put that on the vocal. So there's 3 reverbs: short in the first verse, big reverb in the choruses, and second verse somewhere in between. So there's already 3 verbs. And I won't turn them all off. I'll just rebalance them. So you can have your verse about here, comes down, chorus reverb comes in, then the verse comes in, and this one comes down, the chorus one comes down. It's like of a game. I like hearing all 3 at once, but at different volumes. So it keeps one sound, keeps a unique sound of these 3, but you just blend them. And it works really well because it's almost like a singer's leaning in at a stadium and screaming, and it's louder through the PA. So there's more verb. And in the first verse, he's just pulling back, he or she's pulling back and just like kind of creating this much tighter sound. So don't be afraid to do that. Same thing with delays. I'll have an 1/8 note, a 1/4 note delay, but I'll also have a slap back delay as well on the vocal. I'll take the longer delays and push them in the choruses, and then bring them down in the verses. And the verses, maybe I'll favor the slap, like a dirty slap with a bit of distortion on it. Again, 3 delays for me is very typical. So you're gonna have 3 delays and 3 reverbs. It's already 6. Honestly, I have even more than that sometimes. It's all about a game of balancing them where you want them to be. So don't be afraid to use multiple reverbs and delays. And the same goes for guitar parts as well, but vocals in particular. Thank you ever so much for listening to the 10 mixing tips that I do every single mix. I really, really appreciate it. Please leave any questions and comments below. Let us know what are the mixing tricks that you always do. I would love to know. We would all love to know. Thank you ever so much for being an incredible community. Please hit the like button and share, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. We'll see you all again very, very soon.